Good morning. Welcome to the Larry Krauss Family Office Tax Institute. I've been producing programs for single-family offices since 2016, 62 in all. I have a parallel track for technology and operations, which began in 2021. You already met my collaborator on technology. We have another program going on July 9th, Navigating Healthcare for Family Offices Best Practices. So I want to introduce Liza Garber from CohnReznick, who basically helped me put together this program, which was very opportune. And I'm going to introduce our moderator. Tony Gebely is the founder of Annapurna Cybersecurity, a firm dedicated to safeguarding successful individuals, families, and their enterprises against complex cyber threats. Before embarking on this venture, Tony served as the Chief Technology Officer at Family Office Exchange, where his role as a trusted cybersecurity advisor provided invaluable insights, guiding the firm's members in developing, refining, and maintaining robust cybersecurity programs. His deep understanding of the unique challenges faced by these families inspired him to establish Annapurna Cybersecurity, focusing on comprehensive threat assessments and the development of tailored cybersecurity strategies. With that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Tony. Take it away.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks for that introduction, and thanks everyone for joining us this morning. As Phil said, I came from Family Office Exchange, and during my time there, I really learned about the ins and outs of family offices and what cyber threats they face, and that's what led me to go out on my own and start my own company. So, I'm lucky to be here today and be a moderator with our great panel. So today, I am joined by two panelists. We have Annmarie Giblin from Norton Fulbright and David Sun from CohnReznick. I'll just give a quick introduction on our two panelists here today. Annmarie Giblin is a partner in the Global Cybersecurity and Privacy Group at Norton Fulbright. She assists clients to navigate the legal complexities surrounding cybersecurity, privacy, and data management with a focus on data governance, maintenance, cybersecurity, planning and policies, privacy concerns and strategies, emerging technologies, including all aspects of artificial intelligence and related compliance programs. She is a frequent speaker and author on these subjects. Annmarie received her BA from the University of Albany SUNY and her JD from St. John's University School of Law. Annmarie co-chairs the Privacy and Cybersecurity team at the American Inns of Court. David Sun leads the Cybersecurity Incident Response and Computer Forensic Services for CohnReznick Cybersecurity Practice. He develops comprehensive cloud security service offerings that provide clients with access to an end-to-end suite of cybersecurity, technology risk, and privacy services. David has 25 years of cybersecurity and IT management experience, responding to data breach and privacy incidents, internal employee malfeasance, and government agency investigations. His expertise in responding to cyber attacks and resuming business operations, investigating email compromises, data breaches, and multi-million-dollar losses from wire fraud, performing forensic analysis, reconstruction, and post-breach remediation, and prosecuting departing employees for theft of sensitive information, destruction of documents, and unauthorized activities. That's a lot. That was a mouthful. Sorry about that. But David has a great pass there. Okay, so today we're going to be discussing ransomware. And, for those that aren't aware, ransomware is a type of malicious software that encrypts a victim's files, locking them out of their device and making the data and system inaccessible. Bad actors then will demand a ransom, hence the term ransomware, that is often paid in cryptocurrency in exchange for the keys that will decrypt that data and make it usable once again. And as you'll hear, these attacks are on the rise, especially in the family office space, and we thought that this would be a great topic for this session. So without further ado, let's get started. David, what are you seeing in our space right now in regard to ransomware?
Yeah, thanks, Tony. So, I'm seeing a lot of different things in our space right now. So you just described ransomware as malicious software that encrypts data, shuts a company down, shuts an organization down, demands a payment in order to resume operations. What's actually happened is this attack has morphed, and the reason it's morphed is because IT got better at responding to or defending against ransomware. What do? They made sure their backups worked, right? And so there was a period of time where the ransomware gangs were not getting paid because people didn't need the decryption key to get access to their data and resume operations. IT had backups that they could restore to. So, yay for the IT guys, right? That's a win. Well, of course, in this never-ending war that goes back and forth, these threat actors responded. And so nowadays, when you have ransomware, it is not just the encryption of the data and the shutting down of the business. In some cases, it doesn't even involve that. What they've done is they've taken it a step further, and in addition to encrypting your data and holding your business operations ransom, they've actually exfiltrated or copied off some of the most sensitive data that you have. So all of your all your staff's social security numbers, driver's licenses, passports, bank account information, healthcare records, whatever it is that you might have in your possession. These bad guys are rummaging around in your environment, finding it and exfiltrating it before they then start the encryption. And the reason they do that is because when they ask you for $1 million in Bitcoin so that you can get a key to resume operations, if your response is, sorry, go pound sand, don't need it, my IT guys have this under control, their response becomes, not what you think, sorry to you. I have everybody's social security's number. I have bank account information. I have somebody's diary, whatever it is that's the most secret information that they could find that was in electronic form. They have it, and they'll threaten to publish it online if you don't pay the ransom. So now the ransom you're paying a ransom not just to resume business operations. Even if you don't need that, you're paying for what's called suppression. The idea is that this data doesn't get out there online for the rest of the world to see. That's one of the things that we're seeing. And so at the end of the day, they get their money one way or another. It's kind of how it works. And so that's what you have to be careful of. It's not just the ransom. It's not just the business interruption anymore. And again, sometimes I call it, ransom without the ware, because they don't even use malware sometimes. They just get in there, get your data, and leave you a note saying, hey, we're going to post your most sensitive data if you don't pay a ransom. They let you stay up and running. And so that data exfiltration is a huge problem.
And what's the specific risk for family offices that you're seeing?
I think for family offices, I see one sort of this awareness gap, right? Where a lot of organizations don't understand that every organization can be hit with ransomware. There is no such thing as too small to be compromised or attacked. These attacks are done in an automated fashion. So it's not like somebody sat there and said, who do I want to go after today, and pick a name out of a hat that they know about. That's not the way it works. There's automation that goes on. So if you think about it, every computer on the internet has what's called an IP address or an address. And it's kind of like a phone number. And what do you know about phone numbers? You can go to your carrier and get a new phone number that's never been used. And within about a day, you will probably get some automated call trying to sell you, a timeshare or something, right? Well, that phone number is new. How did they know to call you? Well, they didn't. There's 10 digits in a phone number. And so that means there's a finite number of phone numbers, and there are computers out there that will call every single phone number in existence, right? Just rotate through from 0000001 to 9999, whatever, right? And they hit every single number. Same thing with these computer systems and these attacks. There are a finite number of addresses on the internet. If your computer's on the internet, they will automate and try to attack you. And so again, no such thing as being too small. That's number one. Number two, another risk I see is this sense that my IT guy has it under control. Organizations have IT talent. There's nothing, this is not against IT talent. A lot of smart IT people out there. The problem is that IT is not the same as security. They're actually very different things. It's like building a house versus securing a house. Okay. Contractors know how to build a house. They can build a very, very strong house and keep it standing and have it withstand earthquakes. That's great. But can they defend against, a thief that knows the latest and greatest of how to pick locks and how to jimmy doors, right? So IT is not the same. IT operations is keeping the systems up and running, keeping emails working, not the same as security. And so you need to understand the difference between the two, and really vet whether your IT person is a security expert or not. And another two things real quick is not having backups, right? Backups still help, don't get me wrong. Even though you have the data exfiltration part, at least if you have backups, you can get up and running and restore within a couple of days versus having to, pay up that money in order to resume operations probably in a longer time period. So if you have backups, you can get back up and running pretty quickly. And then for some organizations, they may feel that IT isn't mission critical. They may feel like, well, we're a small family office, only a few people. We don't need to do emails. We can do phone calls. We can do, something else. Go old school, right? The problem is, it sounds great until you really try to operate without IT, and then you realize that you really can't do anything. You can't do banking. You can't, you can't schedule something. I mean, everything is online these days, right? And so if you don't have IT, you're severely hobbled, if not completely shut down. So those are the things I'm seeing as a risk. And then the other thing, just to reiterate, is that the encryption is not it. It's not the main event, right? The data exfiltration is the bigger problem that creates a lot of risk, which Annmarie can really get into here. And so I'll sort of hand it over to her.
Yeah, to follow up on that, and to add to just some regular risks that face family offices, I think being outed as a high net worth individual or your family members and who you're connected to is one unique risk to this space, because a lot of times family offices and high net worth individuals are under, lock and key. They're pretty incognito. They try to remain that way. And now being outed is the biggest thing. And especially family secrets. A lot of times there's no demarcation between the family and the family office or the business. And a lot of times founders or family members use both emails or the same to do family business as well. So maybe you're dealing with someone that had, some type of issue, things that could be used against you in divorce, things that could make the papers, depending on your standing. It just becomes more of an embarrassment. And I think that's the difference here when we're dealing with business information versus personal information, because there are things in there that people don't want to get out. On top of it, to add to this, and David and I are actually dealing with one right now. Some of these gangs like to call people. So they get your contact information and they're going to call you and harass you because they want the ransom. So we call that a secondary ransom, because just like David said, the backups will get you back to work. They'll get your data back. So you don't have to worry about what they've encrypted. But now we're worried about them posting it on the dark web, having other people scrape it. And then the threat actor actually calling and contacting you and your employees to really scare you into paying it. So the risks are really significant. On the legal side, they're really significant. And I think this is where family offices really, kind of get confused. And kind of what David was saying is, well, I have a third-party vendor that's dealing with that. That's their problem. That's why I hired them. No, it's your data. As the data owner, you are still liable for any risks and security of that data. So if you have a data breach, and it includes the personal information of anyone, even your family members included, you have to go through the steps to make sure that data breach is properly noticed. That may include notifying the Attorney General, the Department of Commerce, head of police. It could require notifying a financial organization or regulator like the SEC or New York DFS. It really depends on what type of data you have, why you have it, and how it's being secured, and then where the person lives, if it's personal information. So data breaches become very messy pretty quickly, especially in a ransomware situation, and especially depending on how the family office operates. If it's a single family office and there's no other regulatory requirements, then you're still dealing with data breach in potentially 50 states, depending on who works for you and where they live. If it's a multi-family office, well, then you're pretty secure under SEC regulation, and now you have to deal with different thresholds for when I'm reporting. How am I reporting? Do I have to report to any other financial regulators? Do I have to notify law enforcement? How am I working with law enforcement? Is there now a personal safety risk to me as well too? And then one other nuance here as well too is a lot of family offices, especially the older family members, they're on the boards or they are parts of other organizations, and they have very high senior position in those other organizations. So your family office breach or even your individual breach could impact your other positions as well too. And then you have to go out and explain to your other boards and the other organizations you work with, now my personal information is out there. I may be a target. And now they may know I'm a board member here. I'm a member of this organization. And that just raises the personal and legal risk as well too. So it becomes messy really quickly.
Annmarie, thanks. That's really helpful. I feel like the legal side of cybersecurity is often overlooked. So it's good to hear that there are some things that need to be done and that, you can assist with that. In that same vein though, who's responsible for losses due to ransomware?
So, for the most part, it really depends on where it's coming in. And that can get messy as well too, because depending on how you're keeping and this goes back to having a good cybersecurity program, because if you think, all right, I'm going to hire this vendor and they're going to handle all my, as David would say, my IT, and you're assuming that you're handling your cybersecurity, maybe they're not. Or maybe they're doing it in a way that's the most minimum. You want the lowest package we have. That means we're not doing anything. We're basically just there to answer your phone calls and keep your computers on, but we're not giving you anything else. And that could be a real problem when something bad happens, because the way we go back and investigate, or I should say the way I ask David when I hire him to investigate, is we review logs. And as you know, Tony, that's the keys to the kingdom there. What happened? We're really looking for a needle in a haystack, going through and seeing how did they get in? What did they touch? It goes back to licenses you have. So a lot of people don't even realize this. If you have Microsoft 365 at this point, 365, there's certain licenses that give you more visibility into your email system or your Outlook environment or your SharePoint environment. And it can tell you who accessed this when, how long were they in. That really helps in a cyber investigation. But if you don't have that level license, or you're not maintaining the logs, or you haven't turned on the controls, and this happens all the time. We go in and we're like, great, let's pull down the SharePoint logs. They're like, oh, we didn't click that button that actually was maintaining them. And now there's no record of them. Well, now we're really looking for a needle in a haystack because we don't even have anything to investigate. So that really goes back to the family office, because at the end of the day, you are the data owner. You're the one responsible for it. And really understanding this, all data that comes through the environment now has some type of legal protection on it. Believe it or not, the financial data you have is probably the least legally protected, because it really goes back to the banks when they're holding it. And then it's not considered personal information, but that could be some of the most valuable data you have. The really expensive, legally protected data is personal information. And that's thinking about your household staff, your family office staff, yourself. That's the information that's going to be a really big headache to deal with. So at the end of the day, the data owner is liable, and then it's fighting to see how you share that liability. Do you have a cyber insurance policy? Do the vendors you have have cyber insurance policies? Are you even eligible to make a claim under their cyber insurance policy? Figuring these things out during the middle of a ransomware is a nightmare. So it's really good to do this stuff beforehand and get these things in place, so it's a lot easier after the fact.
Sure. And to your point with the IT organization, I think that a lot of the enhanced security packages that are offered are just seen as needless upsells. And I would say that the majority of family offices that we work with are not collecting logs, which is necessary in any sort of forensic discovery process, right?
It is.
It's unbelievable. So having that third party view, that third party or separate vendor separating cybersecurity and IT is of utmost importance in this situation for sure. Okay, so let's say an organization, a small family office, was impacted by ransomware. They noticed it on a device. David, from a technical standpoint, what steps should be taken the moment someone notices that ransomware has impacted a device?
Yeah, I mean, so, this is an interesting question, right? Because from a technical perspective, if you notice ransomware occurring, it's kind of game over. Like from a technical perspective, there's not a whole lot you can do, right? I mean, the horse is out of the barn. I mean, I tell people, if you see it, in your first 15 minutes, what you probably need to be doing is, activating what's called your instant response plan, if you have one. Hopefully you do.
You have one.
Yeah, that's sort of like the emergency plan, right? Pull that off the shelf. Or hopefully you can still get it. It hasn't been encrypted, right? That's another problem. But pull that off the shelf and look at it. And the instant response plan should tell you what you need to do, who you need to call, what the steps are, right? Usually, yeah, call your cybersecurity insurance if you have one, right? Because they will have a policy, and in the policy will help steer you towards certain resources. Make sure you get what's called a breach coach or data privacy attorney like Annmarie. And you're going to want to bring in sort of a forensic provider. So those are your first 3 phone calls, basically, and that I would say you do. A lot of people think, well, I should shut the machines down, right? That's the first thing I should do. And it's like, well, Maybe, but maybe not, right? And that's going to depend on what's going on in your environment, what kind of systems you have. And so that's where getting that those people who know how to who know how to respond to these incidents, the forensics and people like that can say, okay, yeah, based on what we're seeing here, the type of systems you have, the type of ransomware is current, yes, let's shut it down, or no, let's keep it up. We need it to stay alive, so to speak, because sometimes when you shut it down, you lose all evidence, right? And again, going back to what Annmarie's saying, now you have nothing, now you have no logs, no trails to go on to investigate this. So that's really all I have, as far as what you can do. Again, it's kind of that's kind of once ransomware is occurring, your technical options get severely limited, and it's about piecing things back together again.
I do want to point out there's a nuance in what you said to pull that incident response plan off the shelf, right? Because if you stored it digitally in your environment that was just encrypted by ransomware, then you don't have it.
Yep, that's exactly right.
So Annmarie, from a legal standpoint, what do we do when ransomware, an incident occurs?
Well, yeah, and just to follow up on that, when we put proactive programs in place, we actually make them print out the cyber incident response plan, give it to the cyber incident response team, and sometimes we even laminate it if people don't trust themselves. Always have it in hard copy. And this is, David was mentioning going old school, that this is what we really have to do in this environment. I would reorder a little bit. I totally agree with David, but I would say call your lawyer first. And there's a few reasons why. Obviously, because I'm a lawyer and it's self-serving, but really because what's happening now, especially with ransomware, cyber incident, data breach, it has become a legal problem and it is a legal issue. So you want to get your attorney involved, number one, because they're going to come in and as outside counsel get things privileged as much as possible. Remember, the facts are not privileged. I can't shield the fact that you're dealing with a cyber incident or this happened. What I can help do is make sure that our communications are confidential, that we're talking about legal issues and we're addressing them before we make decisions. So for example, say you have a cyber insurance policy and you want to tap it right away. And you're like, Annmarie, we're dealing with a ransomware. I'm going to call my cyber insurer. Well, hold on there for 1 second. What did you say on your cyber insurance application about what your security looks like? Did you say that you have MFA on every device? Did you say that you're doing this, that, and the other for your program? And the reason they got in is because you don't have MFA and you were doing none of the stuff that you said you were doing. Well, let's not call your cyber insurance policy right now, because what's going to happen is they're going to disclaim, they're not going to cover you for this, and you're never going to get cyber insurance again. So this might be one that you have to take it out of pocket, and we're going to address it, and we're going to get you up to speed. And then we're either going to notice your cyber insurance carrier after it's all addressed, and then tell them what we've done to remediate your program, or we're going to, depending on the policy, we're just going to handle this ourselves. And then next time at renewal, either disclose it or say it's not a covered claim. And we do that strategically because you don't want to lose cyber insurance. And it's really common that the application that you put in, especially for smaller businesses, does not match the reality of what your program looks like. And we're seeing cyber insurers push back on that now. It was a much different environment a few years ago when people were trying to show the value of cyber insurance. And it's still, you could still probably get some coverage. A lot of times they'll do what's called a reservation of rights, meaning we'll cover you now, but if we decide later on that you weren't honest with us, well, we're going to ask for all that money back and we're not going to cover you going forward. And that's a really bad position to be in. So I would really say call your attorney first and evaluate your options. And then on top of it, your cyber, we're called breach coaches because we kind of quarterback the process under that umbrella of privilege. And we would bring in David and forensics, and then we would have to mine your data. But you also want to be mindful of how are we dealing with law enforcement? The realities with ransomware have changed. We're still seeing people pay the ransom. But if we don't have to, we recommend that you don't. And what would be the times that we have to? Well, you have to have a really good reason to pay the ransomware at this point, right? It can't be, well, I didn't think it was a problem, I was a target, and now I don't want people to know that I divorced 4 different husbands because it's all in my office email. Well, that's not a good reason. We're dealing with anti-money laundering laws now that specifically deal with who are you giving money to? Are you supporting criminal organizations? The landscape has changed dramatically. So you must have a very good reason, especially if you are regulated as a financial organization, really looking at multifamily offices here, but even family offices, single family offices, understanding that someone's going to be very interested of you paying a criminal. And we know they're criminals. They're holding our information for ransom. So even if you're going to get someone that says, I'll give you a compliance memo, how good is that compliance memo if we don't know who we're dealing with and we don't know that this information is on the OFAC list yet? Because guess what? It's going to be on the OFAC list after we pay this ransom. So understanding that becomes a very dicey situation. You know, what are the good situations we can pay a ransom? I'm in a hospital and 10 people are going to die if I don't. Well, that's a good reason. You know, that's human life. Embarrassment, needs to get the files back, very questionable. And we're not starting to see the level of regulatory scrutiny on that yet, but it's coming. And we are seeing the laws and regulations tighten around this issue. So understanding beforehand that it may not be an option for us to pay this ransom, and we may have to deal with the fallout of all of our information being posted online. And then our clients, customers, family members saying, why wasn't it encrypted? How come they didn't get in? Why didn't you have MFA? Now we're also dealing with lawsuits. And that's why it's really important to have an attorney be the first phone call, because an experienced attorney is going to see that long game and start to prepare you for it. Who are we worried about? Whose information do you have? Are we worried about your employees suing you? Are we worried about the state coming in and doing an investigation? Are you regulated by industries and have a 72-hour reporting requirement? We're going to be doing all these things at the first gap, while we also call David to come in and do forensics, and we deal with your cyber insurance if you have it. So it's really important to understand that this has become a very complicated legal issue, and you really do need steady hand through it.
Thanks, Annmarie. Okay, so we know we're calling Annmarie first when something happens, right? But is there anything we can do before something happens to make detection and mitigation easier and more effective, David?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot you can do ahead of time to help hopefully prevent ransomware, or make it so that if you do get hit, it's not as bad, right? And we can spend a whole hour and a half on just that. So I won't cover all of them, but highlights, right? There's sort of the prevention piece of it, which is make sure you have good endpoint detection and response software, EDR software. This is sort of the next generation of antivirus, right? What we've historically have seen as antivirus, or Norton antivirus, Trend, McAfee, Kaspersky, if you're on that.
Can't use that one anymore.
Can't be on that anymore. Yeah, but those types of antivirus tools don't work anymore, right? And they haven't worked for a good 10 years. What you need now is what's called EDR, endpoint detection and response, and they sort of take it up a notch, and they involve a lot of artificial intelligence, let's just say. And so that's what you really need. So if you're using the older stuff, the older antivirus, Microsoft Defender, the free that came with Windows, you need something better. Okay, so that's going to help you detect some of the malware as it lands in. Multi-factor authentication, Annmarie talked about it a little bit. MFA. That's that thing where you log in and you get a text message, or you have an app that pops up. You have to enter a code, right? You need that. You need that everywhere, anywhere and everywhere, right? But I will say that 5 years ago, that was the answer. 5 years ago, multi-factor authentication. That's the answer. If you got that, that's the solution. Well, not anymore. Again, the hackers have gotten better. They found ways to get around multi-factor authentication, but still, it's sort of like the 10% rule, right? And so multi-factor authentication still is good for, say, 90% of things. Okay, so you want to have it. Another thing you need to do is you need to control remote access, especially in your family office environments. We have small offices where maybe you have a computer and people want to remote into the computer from their home and their iPad or whatever it is, and knock out that one thing, right? That remote control software, PC Anywhere, AnyDesk, TeamViewer, any of those software, you got to be careful with those, because those get hacked, or more importantly, those get put on and you don't realize that they're on there. Annmarie and I are working on one, and there's like 3 different types of remote control software in this company. And even the IT department didn't realize that, right? And that's like, whoa, that's bad. Okay, so if you're using it, make sure there's only the one you use on your systems, and then make sure that they're properly protected. Again, MFA goes back to that as an example. Other things I would say is isolate your environment, isolate your backup environment, right? So one of the first things the hackers do when they're about to launch ransomware, the first thing they do is they get into the backup systems, they delete all the backups, corrupt them, make them inoperable, right? Because again, they want that money. So you need to have backups. IT needs to have backups, and then they need to be protected. So make sure that they're protected. Another thing I would say is security awareness training, and that's sort of the program where all your people, including the members of the family, go through training where they get some webinars, 20-minute, 30-minute webinars that teach them, look, here's how you spot a bad email. Here's how you spot a suspicious text message. Here's how you call out a suspicious phone call. Maybe somebody's trying to get you to agree to do something over the phone. And then a number of other things, social engineering, dropping USB drives, suspicious USB devices, and connecting those. Again, there's just so many things that are going on out there, and making sure that everybody, including all the family members, know this stuff and have sort of reminders, right? Once a quarter, maybe get a 5-minute refresh webinar going on. And so offering that training and tracking that the training is taken and that they pass the 5 multiple choice questions at the end, right? That verifies they learned the material. That's something that everybody needs to do, and including the family members, because they're the ones who are going to get targeted, especially the kids, right? Social media, it's huge. And so making sure that they have that security awareness training and having that program in place, and it's not very expensive to do, and it's so critical. So those are sort of like a handful of things I would say. But I know Annmarie has some things also that she can offer.
Oh yeah, to add to that, training really is so critical. I always use this example, that if you have a house and you lock your front door with 5 different locks and you put a dresser in front of it, well, no one's getting in the front door. But if you leave every single window open, well, what is the point, right? They're just going to claw on the window, and your people are your windows. So even if you have, a virtual CISO, a great organization doing front end security, but you have one person that'll click on every single email they get, and there's no way to monitor that, well, you've done nothing, and it's a waste of money. So really understanding, number one, what are the unique threats coming to us? And do my people understand what to do? Because a lot of times with ransomware in particular, and David will, I think, back me up on this, they come in well before they actually put the ransomware on. They're in your system. So something happened. Someone clicked on something, someone noticed something funky, and no one said anything. They were either scared they were going to lose their job, or they weren't aware that this could be the harbinger of something to come. So really understanding that people have to be your eyes and ears, see something, say something that works for your organization with cyber, because you want to know, because it will be a few days, a few weeks, a few months, depending on how big your environment is, that these hackers will be in there hunting around. They want to get your juicy data. They want to learn how you're working. They want to see, can they trick other of your business partners or other family members to also let them into their environment via phishing email. So understanding that if people know and seeing things and are reporting it to you, you can stop it before the malware actually encrypts your data. You can know that they're in, and it becomes a much less bad situation. Mitigation here is really key. Finding it as early as possible and stopping it is the key, because they only have to get right. We have to be right every single time. They only have to get it right once. So the odds are in our favor, because we're playing defense. If they just get in once, that's it, game over for us. And now we're dealing with all these headaches. So finding it, responding to it, and shutting down is really important. Segmentation, what David was saying, and encryption. Encryption is one of the best tools and one of the best bangs for your buck that you can get. If you have a properly encrypted environment, even if the hackers get in and they don't have access. So what David said, your access controls go back to who can view encrypted documents. Well, then you're really secure, and that actually obviates the need to report most data breaches if you have a properly encrypted environment. If encrypted data is exfiltrated without the key and there's no way to decrypt it, now asterisk on that, with artificial intelligence, it's getting much easier to decrypt without the key. But being realistic, if you're working on those things, that's one way to defend yourself. And also understanding that what threats are coming in and what does our public profile look like. Knowing information about yourself, Google your family, see who's out there. Google your staff, do background checks, especially for household staff. That can be a really big gap in a cybersecurity program for a family office, because they have just as much access to the family and the business environment by their very role of working in the household, and you may not know who this person is. From some people, I've heard different stories of people coming in trying to do serial things where they're suing families, to even rogue actors. We've actually had situations for companies where we've done dark web searching on a proactive defense. We want to know who's out there, who's looking at the company. And we found out that there's been rogue employees that have just gotten jobs to gain access to the system. They want to learn how it works, and they're going to sell that access on the dark web. So understanding that this happens, this is a today problem, is really important as well too. And just being aware of the issue and trying to do your best. This is not something you do once and forget it. It's something that you have to deal with every single day.
Annmarie, from a legal perspective, if a family hasn't worked with you and your team on the proactive side of things and something hits the fan, like, are they just calling you and, screaming, or is there some sort of like relationship that they can have with you and your team prior to an event occurring?
Yeah, really, getting these things done beforehand, especially in today's environment. We're on the precipice of new regulations starting. Not only are we dealing with new SEC regulation that may encompass family, especially even single family office in some different way. Again, you guys are on your own little island and for the most part aren't regulated. But if you have a lot of money and you're moving markets and this is happening to you, the SEC can still come in and ask you questions. And the danger with a regulatory investigation is it doesn't have to be limited just to this one issue. It doesn't have to be what were you doing for your cybersecurity. It could also be, hey, do you have books and records? How are you doing with your investments? What are you doing with material non-public information? These things really start to snowball. And I would even say, regulatory investigations is the one we worry about the most. But doing everything beforehand and understanding, number one, what are my regulatory obligations? Do I have a 72-hour reporting requirement? Do I have to file something within 4 days? Do I have to let the federal government know? CISA right now has promulgated regulations that are several pages long that are now being commented on. But once they go into effect, they affect critical infrastructure. So this could also affect your investments or board memberships you're on, and it could come back to you in different ways. So going back to our example before, if I'm sitting on the board of a large carrier, right? Say a large ship carrier that ships all over the world, and my family office is hacked, and now they have my social security number and all my information and videos of me, and they're trying to deepfake me. Well, I have to tell the board I'm sitting on, I have to tell that company, maybe I have a government clearance, and I have to tell the government, and now everybody's looking at this tiny little breach out of my family office because of my role in the community. So understanding that that becomes a really big deal is really important as well too. And dealing with that beforehand is key. Knowing who do I have to call, who do I have to deal with beforehand. Also understanding what information you have and why you have it. We are not in the days where you take as much information anymore and just keep it. There's legal obligations with regards to this information. And if you don't have the legal right to have it anymore, well, that's a secondary risk. Because after we deal with the breach and dealing with all the notifications, someone's going to come back and say, why'd you have my information from 10 years ago? I haven't worked for you in 10 years and you should have deleted it. What was your legal justification for that? Now I'm suing you for keeping my information longer than you should have. So things start to snowball really fast. And what we would do is come in and help you do that. But if you haven't done that, and David and I deal with this as well too, we come in and we help you. And then what we do is something called the lessons learned, which is now that we know this is an issue, now we know what happened, we're going to come in and fix it after the fact.
Well, I would also add that some of the other things we can do on the proactive side is, a lot of times I have clients who will say, yeah, my IT has it, and they probably do, right? They're a good organization, but like they say, trust but verify, right? So let's test things, right? Let's test what your IT department says they've done. We can come in and do a test, what's called a penetration test, which is we try to, we have a person who's a white hat hacker, a good hacker, right, playing on our team, and they're going to try to hack into your environment and see if they can get in. We'll send emails, phishing emails, see who clicks. And if they click, that lets us in, right? So again, we can take on the role of a hacker and see and really test this assertion, this belief that you guys are secure. Another thing we can do also is test the logs, right? Annmarie talked about how important the logs are for any type of incident, the records of what happened on a system, right? Those logs, having those and being able to having them and having the right kind of logs is critical, and being able to piece them back together to determine what happened. Well, sometimes what we'll do is we'll combine a penetration test with a log test. That log test is, can I piece back together exactly what happened here? Or do you have gaps in visibility? So, kind of, again, think of like a video surveillance. You might have video surveillance all around your house, except for there's one door that you forgot to cover, right? And the idea is to help figure out, do I have the visibility I need into all of the parts of my system so that if something bad happens, I can figure out what happened, right? So these are the kinds of tests, even from a technical perspective, that we can do ahead of time to help your organization out.
Great, thanks. And we've heard it in many different ways, but I'll reiterate: you are only as secure as your weakest link, right? And it's organizations like ours that can help you find those weak links ahead of time and mitigate them. So yeah, that's been very interesting talk from the legal side. So thanks to the both of you on that, on ransomware. But what other threats are you seeing in our space today aside from ransomware? David, you want to take this?
Yeah, so we talked about ransomware a lot, and it's a big thing. But I'll be honest, it's probably not the biggest threat you need to worry about right now. As crazy as that. And we all talk about ransomware, and it's an attractive headline, gets people to listen, gets people's ears up. I mean, look, you can't buy a car right now, right? Everybody's getting hit with ransomware. Last year, you couldn't get gas. But again, it's headline making. But I would say probably the biggest threat, the thing that a family office is more likely to experience from a cyber attack, is what's called the business email compromise. All right, and that's just a fancy term for somebody hacked your work email. All right, but think about that. Think about what would happen if somebody got access and downloaded all of your inbox and sent items. Like, what's in there? Okay, and what can they do if they have access to your email? Well, what are we seeing? We're seeing that they'll target, say, the CFO or somebody who has control over the money, right? And they will compromise the account, and then they will send an email out as that person to the bookkeeper and say, hey, please wire $150,000 to X, Y, and Z. Here's a fake receipt, a new vendor we just created, right? And sometimes the bookkeeper will just do it because they're used to acting on those emails, and they're not used to making that phone call to do the voice validation, right? My team is investigating business email compromises every day. We have like 3 right now going on at the same time that we're doing, right? And some of those losses are huge. We're talking, I have one that I did 2 months ago. The first wire that went out was for $3 million, right? That went out the door. The second wire was for 5. And it wasn't until there was an $8 million wire queued and ready to go for the person to press release that somebody said, who's this new vendor that we just onboarded and are spending so much money with? I mean, some of these dollar amounts can be large. Now, maybe your organization doesn't have to worry about amounts that large, but still, 150,000, 200,000. I mean, that's still a lot of money to lose because somebody compromised your email. Other things they can do is they can redirect things. So what we're saying is if you might get emails, if you're the HR person, you might start getting emails from somebody saying, hey, please redirect my payroll to this new account. I changed my checking account. Here's my direct deposit, my new direct deposit information. Now somebody's going to lose paychecks, right? And that's a big problem. Another thing that they do is when they download all the emails, they know the relationships. They know who talks to who. And then what they start doing is they start emailing that other person and attacking that other person using, if it's you, using your personal capital, so to speak, to get that person to let their guard down. And they'll get that your friend who you email with all the time, they'll get your friend to click on the link that lets them into your friend's network and environment now, right? So they'll do that. And then the other piece, and this is the piece where Annmarie comes into play, is like, what's in your email? What kind of protected information is in your email? I've done BECs where just one email was compromised. But guess what? That email had an Excel spreadsheet attached to it. And that Excel spreadsheet was the payroll report and had everybody's personal information. So one email compromised 10,000 people's information, right? So again, what's in your email? And if it gets compromised. And what we're seeing is these BECs, there's a high degree of correlation between these business email compromises and Microsoft 365. Now, don't get me wrong. I love Microsoft 365. My firm uses it. I tell all my clients. I have people coming all the time. David, you're big into cyber. I want to go to the cloud. What cloud platform should I use? I say, use Microsoft 365. That's the one you should go to. And then I say, but by the way, Microsoft 365 is probably the most compromised cloud platform there is. And so they're always like, well, why are you telling me to go there, right? and so it's important to understand that Microsoft 365, it's actually a very strong platform. Microsoft spent a lot of time and energy developing a lot of great security controls that can protect an organization. But the problem is, for whatever reason, Microsoft sort of disabled all of those by default, right? So out of the box, when you buy Microsoft 365 vanilla, it is a very open and permissive environment, and the security settings are almost all disabled. And they did it, I think, because it allows you to migrate your data in and get up and running and get into the environment, and everybody's sort of, oh, wow, this is great. You can explore around and see all sorts of new features that you want to spend extra money on or something, right? But the problem is that your IT needs to know enough about needs to know to turn it back on, all these security controls back on. There's got 120 security controls. They need to know to turn those security controls on, and they need to know enough about Microsoft 365 to know what each of those security controls are and what they should be, right? Unfortunately, the problem is with a lot of, it's new. Microsoft 365 has only been around for a few years, and they change it. Every week I go in there, it's new. There's new feature, new controls. And so the challenge that a lot of IT organizations have is they don't have the time to really get in there and become experts in all the security controls. And so when it comes to securing or hardening Microsoft 365, a lot of them will be like, well, what's this new security control? What does it do? I don't know, but I don't want to, email's working. I don't want to mess with it. Don't turn it on. It might break email, right? And so of course they don't risk it. And so it's really important if you're in Microsoft 365 to do what's called a Microsoft 365 security assessment. Right? We do a lot of those, and we find, we help organizations look at all of those security settings and determine how they're set and if they should be changed or not. And if they should be changed, what the new setting should be. And it's a fairly cost-effective, high value, low cost, high value type of thing that you can do, because again, Microsoft 365, if you think about it, it sort of has a lot of your most important data in it. And so I see that as being sort of a threat that people really don't recognize or understand, and it's important people sort of hear this.
David, how are people getting in the instance of a business email compromise? What are the attack vectors there?
I mean, there's the old-fashioned guess your password, right? Is your password 123? Okay, Microsoft 365 has gotten a little better. If you got the right plan, they'll ban people from selecting password 123, right? But look, you go to Facebook, and what are those questions on Facebook? What's the first car? Everybody posts up the first car you learn to drive a stick shift on, right? Well, what's that telling you? That what you're telling the world your first make and model of car that you own. That is a very common security question. Right. So when you go to those social media posts, don't answer those things. You're just telling the hackers how to hack you. Right. But people are out there gathering this information. Right. I cannot tell you how many people's passwords are like the name of their cat, Fluffy, and like 123. Right. Fluffy 123 or Fluffy June 2024. Right. It's very common. There are a lot of easily guessed passwords out there. So I would say that's probably the first and foremost way people get in. So they guess the password, or they reuse a password that was it was associated with one of your accounts that was compromised and posted on the dark web. So if you use your work password for your Jamba Juice loyalty account, right, and Jamba Juice gets hacked, make sure you change it. Okay, so that's what people are doing. They're guessing the passwords. That's probably the easiest way. Another way is they're sending out those emails, and you're clicking on them and you're giving up the password, or you're doing what's called this man-in-the-middle attack, which is a new attack that people are using to bypass MFA, which is you get a link, you think you're logging into Microsoft 365, turns out you're logging into a hacker's account, and when you log into the hacker's account and you enter in the code from your multi-factor authentication, you're giving the hacker everything they need so that they can then bypass multi-factor authentication, get into your systems. So again, security awareness training, right? All these things I just talked about can be addressed with reasonable security awareness training.
Annmarie, anything to add here?
Yeah, some other things that we're seeing is spoofing. It's become a really big problem on both ends, where we're seeing hackers spoof legitimate financial organizations thinking that they're soliciting investments, and you're doing your due diligence and everything looks legit, and you've never met this person in public or in person, but their website looks really good. You see they're on LinkedIn. It looks like they work for a major organization, and before you know it, you're investing a lot of money and then you've lost it. That's become really common. We're also, and spoofing also goes to fake Wi-Fi. Like, please, if to the point, like, yes, people actually do throw malicious USB, and it's scary how many times people just plug it into their computer, but don't use free charging stations. Understand the way we charge our phones and our computers, it's a direct line into the hardware. So when you actually plug that in and you're using someone else's device to charge, it could be loaded with malware, and a lot of times they really are. Free Wi-Fi is the same thing. I just did a training at one of my clients, and the CISO came in and was staying in a hotel across the street, and he told me there was 5 different versions of the hotel Wi-Fi, and he confirmed with the hotel that only 2 of them were legitimate. So, hackers are just sitting there with fake Wi-Fi, and if you go on, they're seeing everything. So, understanding what your attack vector is, and obviously spear phishing is still a really big issue. And that's really why you have to understand, number one, who works for you, that they understand the threat, but that they know that their own personal profile online. If it's easy pickings, if I can Google you and know that you sit on this board, or you're in this PTA, or you live in this town, I'm going to use all that to my advantage to try to trick you into opening this email. So that becomes a really big risk as well too. Business email compromise can be really expensive. Just the compromise of your email, understand once there is unauthorized access, even if nothing's taken or nothing's done with the information that we know about, unauthorized access is the threshold. So if you have emails with all of this personal information and they were in for 2 weeks and you don't have the right licenses that I can actually go in and see what emails they looked at, well, I have to just close the whole email inbox. I'm actually closing out an incident right now that involved one email inbox, just one email inbox compromise. We're already at $350,000 in legal spends. We're making sure that there's no other issues with, and this was a company that had insurance. There's no other legal issues with lawsuits. And now we're also dealing with regulators. So understand how quickly one email inbox, one compromise can really snowball.
Thanks, Annmarie. Phil, do we have any questions?
Sure. So if there are any questions to the panelists or the moderator, if you could put them on chat now, that would be great. In the meantime, I just want to thank Tony, fabulous, Annmarie, David, great program. Really learned quite a bit. We had great attendance. I hope to see everyone.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I might have called. I saw that. Yeah.
Tonight, we at the Cornell Club, if you're coming, and you get a chance to talk to Tony, Annmarie, and David, and ask them the questions you didn't put on chat today. Okay?
Well, I do see one, Phil, and I think I could take this one for cyber insurance. So is cyber insurance worth it 1,000%? Now, understand what you're getting, though. Work with your broker to understand what you're actually insuring. So a good cyber insurance policy, and now they do have personal policies. So a lot of times you can endorse this onto your homeowner's insurance or any other personal policy you have the same way that you would endorse on a jewelry endorsement or an art endorsement. But you have to really look at the fine print. Personal cyber insurance is still an evolving line of insurance. So a lot of times they would only cover very specific things like cyberbullying. And the cyberbullying actually covers the kid being bullied, not the bullier. It's been a morphing product and it's starting to change different things. So understand what it actually covers. For the business, for the actual family office business, it's a must-have. You need it for a few reasons. Number one, you need to make sure you have coverage for first party coverage. That means I have an incident, you're going to come in and cover someone getting me back to whole. You're going to cover the cost of me coming in, or at least part of my fee. You're going to cover David coming in. You're going to cover e-discovery. You're going to do all the things I need to do to make sure that the incident has been resolved for my internal environment and that I can get back to working. You're also going to cover things like business interruption and disaster recovery. That's, I need to get to work while I'm dealing with this incident, and then I need to get fully back to work once it's over. You're also going to want third-party coverage. That means that if I have an incident and it affects my partner's environment or my vendor's environment, and they come looking to me to pay for these costs, which happens, that you're going to pay for them. You're going to make sure that they get back to work, and that you're also going to cover any lawsuits or claims that are brought against me. And then the third thing that you're going to want to have is ransomware coverage. And obviously very fitting here, but ransomware coverage has become a bespoke coverage offering for a few reasons. Number one, the ransom payment and the OFAC issues dealing with anti-money laundering checks and treasury to make sure you can pay that, that's become a specialized coverage. So being aware that most policies now will either not cover the payment of ransomware, or what they'll do is reimburse you, but you'll have to do a lot of hurdles to jump through to get that reimbursement, is different. And also you're going to want specialized coverage to actually deal with that, including a ransomware negotiator. This is an entire business now where we can actually hire a company to negotiate with the threat actor to see what the ransomware payment is, what else. And actually one thing to add to that point that just reminded me, we are seeing actually threat actors going on other ransomware actors' dark web pages, seeing that they posted information on companies, and then doing a secondary ransom by claiming that they also stole your information. So being mindful of that. They actually didn't have to hack you or anything. They just say, oh, I saw that Phil Strassler's information's on the dark web. I'm going to email Phil again and say, hey, Phil, I stole all that information. If you don't give me more money, I'm going to post it again on the dark web. So this is happening today as well, too.
I just have one question. David, what are the amounts that people are asking for ransomware when they do that?
When they ask for ransom?
Yes.
I mean, it can vary, right? It depends on the organization. I mean, so like Annmarie said, they get in your environment, and it's really important, right? It's not that somebody clicks the malware and then all of a sudden the very next thing that happens, the encryption starts. That's not what's happening. They get in your environment. They spend a lot of time in your environment. Remember, they copy off the data, they do things, right? It's called dwell time, the time from between when they get in your environment to the time you realize something's wrong. And there's statistics and studies out there, and the average dwell time is 207 days. All right. So they're in there in organizations for a very long time. Maybe for a family office, it might be a little shorter than that. But they'll go in there and they'll figure out what you're worth. I mean, I've seen there have been instances where the ransom demand is within 10% of the insurance policy coverage because they got a copy of your cybersecurity insurance, so they know how much you're good for, right? And so again, they'll figure out how much they think you're worth and make a demand commensurate with that. That demand could be anywhere. I mean, I had one that was recently the demand was $800,000. And we were all pretty relieved that it was only $800,000. Okay. I had another one recently where it's $15 million. And it's like, I don't understand how they got to 15, but they did, and that's what they wanted, right? So it can be anywhere from hundreds of thousands to tens of millions. And it doesn't always make sense, but a lot of times it does.
We have another question here. I think that's it. So I want to thank you again, Annmarie, David, Tony, Jessica, Liza. Great program. Thank you so much. Hope to see most of you tonight. And we can ask more questions, Annmarie, Tony, and David. Take care.
Look forward to
Thank
seeing
you.
everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.